I'm going to call the Marathon County Infrastructure Committee meeting to order. Thank you to everybody for joining us. We'll get started with public comment. We had several people sign up for public comment. Kendra, do you have the list? Judy Przynski, you want to come to the microphone, please? Right up here. Grab that. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine. Yep. Okay.
Good morning, Judy Przynski, 226690 Blue Jay Lane, Ringo, Wisconsin, 54471. I'm just here, I was here yesterday for the Public Safety Committee, and there seems to be a lot of concern about safety on the roads. I reread the ordinance that's in proposal for the ATV, UTV usage, and the 1,500 cars a day limit is more than enough traffic use, and the ordinance states that Mr. Griesbach has a right to open or close any sections of those roads. We are out here to get safe operation. Nobody wants to go in a heavy traffic area. You know, if it's truck traffic because of gravel pits or whatever, close that section down. There's probably a different county road that you can get to go around it. And I guess it's just common sense. And I don't quite understand why it's taking so long, but hopefully this will be the end of it. So, thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have Kevin Clint that wished to speak. Kevin, if you could provide your name and address when you get to the microphone, please.
Kevin Clint, 126765 State Highway 153 in Stratford. Again, I'm with Judy on opening these roads and everything that way. Just mainly, let's keep them safe and everything that way. Our club was actually involved with one individual that actually put on a ride probably about 2.5 months ago. The economic impact just from that one ride, we ended up raising over $10,500 for the Never Forgotten Honor Flight. You guys didn't hear of any accidents, didn't hear of any complaints. We had multiple vehicles with the ATVs and everything that way. Just looking at the more of the economical impact that it would help Marathon County and everything that way. And again, I'd like to thank each and every one of the supervisors and the people on the committee for their due diligence and their time that they have put in on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else that wishes to provide public comment? Do we have anybody on WebEx? All right. That being said, we'll close public comment. We're going to move on to item 3, approval of the minutes of the October 13th, 2021 Infrastructure Committee meeting. We have a motion from Christensen, second from Dickinson. Any further comments, corrections? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed, say nay. Minutes from October 13th are approved. On to item 4, policy issues, discussion, potential committee determination. 4A, section 7.125 ATV UTV ordinance. Do you want to get an update first from Commissioner Griesbach? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yesterday, the Public Safety Committee met. There were some of us from the Infrastructure Committee who were there to speak with them about this ordinance and to listen to the sheriff who commented and just have a general discussion. There were some comments from the sheriff and some comments from Chairman Boots of the Public Safety Committee that I shared with the Infrastructure Committee for suggestions for us to discuss today. They did not create their own ordinance to put up against what infrastructure had approved. Instead, they offered up those suggestions for us to discuss.
All right, thank you for that. Does anybody want to start the discussion? Or we'll take a motion if somebody would like. Go ahead, Supervisor Dickinson.
I guess I can start. one of the comments that well, I don't want to get into that. So some of the comments from the sheriff regarding like the ADT, I think we're in line there with what he was saying with the 1,500. He seemed to be in approval of that. There's discussion about trails versus roads. We don't have trails in this county. We have 2, I believe. So comparatively to other counties, there's really, it's apples and oranges about how, ATVs would be used. As there's comments in other counties that ATVs are going to be, they go on the county roads in order to get to the trails, continue on the trails and move. That would be a little bit different here. So trails would be a completely another discussion about how we would want to help the economy in Marathon County if we created a trail system. Speed limit, there was discussion about the Senate and the Assembly and having a rule, a state law about 35 miles per hour and whether you can go 55 on an ATV on a county highway that's posted as 55 or whether you go 35. Now Portage County, which I think was brought up, they actually have it as 35 miles per hour. So whatever that whole discussion is or is not, I don't know really where that goes, but go ahead.
I can get a little light on that. The Wisconsin Towns Association, Wisconsin County Association, kind of looked into that after UTVs have exploded throughout the state. You see many of the 35-mile-an-hour signs up. According to the corp councils of both of those groups, they feel that that's not enforceable at this point. There are, as Mr. Dickinson mentioned, there are a couple Senate and Assembly bills down there. Speaking to Senator Petrusky's office yesterday, they feel confident that that will get called for a vote in early 2022, that we can post dual speed limits. But as this current time right now, way state statute reads, whatever the posted speed is for the, if you have a 55-mile sign up, that's what it is. You cannot legally post 55 for one and 35 for the other. We hope that that bill will be passed here in early 2022, that we can make that enforceable through the whole state. You do see a lot of those signs. I know Portage County, you see them on a lot of town roads. But again, according to, mostly on the town roads, that's where you see them, especially in Marathon County. Roads ain't open that much. The Wisconsin Towns Association does not feel that's enforceable.
Okay, thank you. I'll continue then. There was there's this comment about safest that was brought up about Marathon County with this mission to be the safest. I would look at that as, what does that mean to be safe? If we're looking at having 0 death on our highways for any reason, that's impossible. I wouldn't consider that, a goal of being safe. I think there is a reasonable discussion about the other parts of the mission statement that we have, which correlate with safety, and that's being the healthiest and the most prosperous. There's plenty of data about the impact that ATVs have on an economy, not just by usage, but also by production and sales. So that was discussed. But I just want to make that singular point in that comment about safety, that it is part of the general discussion about how we live our lives. There was a comment about hours, and the sheriff had mentioned that darkness scares me, was his quote. The hours of darkness defined by the state is a half hour after sunset and a half hour before sunrise. We currently are open an hour on both sides of that. So right now we are completely an hour a day, if not more, in darkness. So that's already happening on roads, and then who knows what the local townships have. There's really no evidence that ATV fatalities happen more at night. Most of the fatalities happen between 12 and 8, if you look at that. So there was that discussion. There was also a discussion about resources in the county from the Sheriff's Department. And I think he had mentioned that we have 2 deputies devoted to recreation. If we don't have trails, I'm not really sure what they're devoted to on that. But we talked about vehicle counts. We talked about trucks. I think it's important to note in that regard that we have lots of truckers who are in these ATV clubs who are able to see ATVs better than they are able to see around other vehicles like implements and things like that. So they don't really have a concern, those folks that we've spoken to, but we certainly understand, I think, on certain roads, if there's a heavily volumed road with trucks, that would be something to consider. Local townships was brought up. We have a map, I think our map is outdated, that we have in the county. I believe the town of Brighton has opened up. We say that they were closed, but I think they're open. Some of them maybe town of Harrison. And then there's some other adjustments in there. But there's a few counties that we would potentially have to, maybe have to consider. Some that have all roads closed, some that have some roads closed. So that would be part of that discussion as well. And going on with that, the hours of operation is discussed. I think we have to, there's the conversation about what we have now and what we would have in the future. And then there was County Highway N was brought up, and then the county roads that connect to other counties, and other counties, what they do. It doesn't look like Clark County has anything in that regard. So I'll just leave it at that in a very general thought. The way I look at it, I will finish up on this. I think the things that we can look at is if we want to close down Highway N because we consider that to have the greater highway traffic, that seems to be an issue. I think that would be something to consider. I don't think we really should be worried about the hours of operation being 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. One of the main concerns of the ATV groups is that they want to have access after work, in the evening, at dinner. That's going to affect fall and spring especially. I don't know who's going to be driving around in the wintertime. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Christensen?
I make a motion that we pass this as read.
All right, we have a motion for approval as presented. Do we have a second? We have a second from Dickinson. Further discussion, Supervisor Robinson.
Chris did a good job, but I think he missed a couple of points relative to the discussion yesterday. And I think one of those was, there were a number of concerns expressed relative to safety, but I think the concerns were that, in the requirement of reflective tape, and thought that was not enforceable under it. But I think the sheriff also pointed out that in cases like NK, Lincoln County has shut down that portion of K, and I believe W was the same. He specifically mentioned those two roads yesterday, and the desire to, because of the high volume, they were shut down by the other counties. And Jim's got a.
I talked to the commissioner up there today. Highway K, we don't have it open in our section, and they never had it open in their section. So Highway K is closed in both, would be closed in both counties. I did talk to Mr. Hands up there today. Highway W is open in Lincoln County. If you don't mind, I'll just kind of, as long as we're talking about other counties, I did talk to these other surrounding counties that, I did not talk to Clark because their roads are all open. I did not talk to Taylor, their roads are open. I did not talk to Shawano, their roads are open. I did not talk to Portage, their roads are open. I did talk to Wood. County Trunk Highway V, which touches ours, that road is not open because they have a lot of truck volume farther south. If we would open up V in Marathon County, they would open up the northern 1.5 miles. County Trunk Highway M is open in Wood County, and all other roads are closed in Wood County because they do what was kind of discussed yesterday. They do not open up the roads in Wood County if the township does not have their roads open. So Highway S and O and T would not be open, and A, because those townships do not have their roads open.
Any further comments? Supervisor Robinson.
I guess, if this passes, do we maintain our speed limit in there of 35 miles an hour?
This is Administrator Leonard. In conversations with Corporation Counsel, as Jim said, right now, the general consensus is we don't have the authority to have a separate speed limit from that which is posted for vehicle traffic. So that was one of those items that when Michael Purner was discussing it, he said we made some revisions to be in compliance with the law. That is one of those revisions. If Senator Petrusky's bill that he's a co-sponsor of those bills that Jim referenced, if that would provide that flexibility back, that's a policy question for this body, whether or not we would like to provide that 35 mile an hour provision within the ordinance. And as Jim said, in our work looking at other counties when we were putting together our ordinance, Kewaunee County, for example, that was a ordinance that many counties use as a pattern. That does have that 35 mile an hour provision in it, at least it did when we looked. But again, keeping with the broad consensus that that authority doesn't exist, and our sheriff's office would feel uncomfortable, of course, enforcing something that is unenforceable, it's not within the ordinance as it currently exists.
Further comment? Go ahead.
I continue to, have concerns over the speed limit issue, and it sounds as if the Senate committee exec'd out their version of 506, and I think it's Assembly 516. It would be nice to know when those are there. I don't know if we can be anticipatory and put the speed limit back in, anticipating that the legislature will do that, doing that. I'd rather do that up front. I understand that there's concerns over our authority to do that, but I think if it's anticipated that it would be there, I'd like to have that in our ordinance. And the second issue that is concerning is the issue of the trucks, and particularly on a limited number of highways. And I think Highway N was one that came out. Can we resolve that issue here? I think we've heard from I think many people have heard from many trucking companies, and it seems to be in those areas. Can we address that issue at the committee?
Is that something that we want to address here, or is that something that needs to go through the process once it's approved, once the ordinance would be approved?
So I think that the ordinance anticipates that there will be a review, a biennial review. The question is whether that biennial review starts in 2 years or can be effective upon passage of the ordinance. If we have those issues of safety relative to trucking, and it's material to, I think, my support for the ordinance. If we can get a provision in there that would allow for immediate review based upon those safety concerns, because we're limiting it to vehicle traffic, and we're limiting it to the Metropolitan Planning Organization. We're not allowing for consideration of the truck traffic at the time of implementation of the ordinance. And I would hope that we would require an initial review relative to safety issues, because again, the ordinance did not anticipate that.
Yeah, and I think to that point, I think that we would want to have some initial review at this point before the signs are installed. That way we're getting ahead of the issue, not that we install signs and then 2 years later we go through that biennial review. Go ahead, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a problem with a lot of this. I do have a problem with putting a speed limit in there, putting signs up when we cannot enforce it. And we're assuming the state is going to pass this. But like I said, I couldn't support this just because of that. I'm not going to pass a resolution that has something we can't enforce. That's going to put a lot of pressure on the Sheriff's Department. So, and like I said, I don't have a problem with the rest of it, but you're going to start putting things in this resolution that we can't enforce. I don't think that would be fair to the Sheriff's Department. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe Supervisor Gums would like to speak. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I feel sort of like Judy said before. It's so disgusting. What is taking so long? This at county board the other night, when you have supervisors from the city bringing up, worrying about safety, and they don't know what they're talking about. Like Judy said, these are just people out to go from one place to the next. It's not it's not crazy, a crazy idea. It's just as people now go that way. And Chris, I want to tell you, I think they may be going in winter because these new UTVs, they have air conditioning and heaters. They might be going all winter from now on. And the one thing I'm going to point out, and I'm usually the one that has to point it out, is we're a little bogus about safety. If we're gonna decline this thing because of safety, then I want to see this committee start with getting bicycles off the road, getting walkers off the road, getting joggers off the road, and really pointing it out that it's silly using that as an excuse. And also, I'm going to bring the sheriff's department to task one more time. Last night there was a manure hauling going on State Highway 13 on Madison County's side, and it was at 8 o'clock at night, pitch dark. Yeah, the trucks, or not the trucks, the tractors and the trailers were all lit well, but really, we got things that weigh 150,000 pounds out on State Highway 13 on the Madison County side, and a squad a half a mile down the road from there sitting watching this, and we're going to talk about safety? Oh, come on. That should have been something that should have been shut down too if we're really going to talk about safety. But yeah, nobody noticed, so nobody's going to say anything, right? So I guess my whole call is these people want to get out there. You've had 1,000 people ask for this. It's up to them to take their lives out on UTVs or ATVs, and let's quit holding this up. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the committee? I guess one thing that I'd like to hear some thoughts on is the item of local control in regards to some of the townships that don't have any of their roads open. Are there any thoughts from the committee on how we handle that? Supervisor Christensen?
I guess I'd like to make maybe an amendment that where the county roads go through a township that do not have their roads open, they have the option of closing those roads down. Thank you.
Do we have a second on that? Second from Seiler. I think we would need to get some language proposed on that as part of the ordinance moving forward. But is that something we can take that sentiment and include that within the policy or within the ordinance? Yep.
My inclination is that we would include that in the section 4A under I. We'd probably add another provision there that relates to the segment is open if it meets all of the following criteria, and craft some language that indicates that there's a criteria that the township or municipality, I should say, in which the county highway segment lies has opened its roadways to ATV, UTV usage. Do I hear you correctly in that?
Yes.
So that's my inclination as to where that would fit. But we can certainly draft that.
Yeah, and I guess to clarify that, would that be, because there's some communities that have only opened up a portion of their roads. I understand if somebody has all their roads open, that's pretty clear on their intent. If they don't have any roads open, that's pretty clear on their intent. But there's that middle. How would we address that? Supervisor Dickinson?
I would be of the mindset that if they have some of their roads open, then we can open our county roads. I would say if we're going to do something like that, it should only be limited to those municipalities that are saying completely no. Otherwise, you start getting into this, well, why is it yes and why is it no, and when are they going to change and how do we change to that? It becomes, again, it's the government just being too involved and making it too difficult and too confusing. So in regards to that, then I want to get a better understanding of what communities we're talking about. Because as I had, the map that we have published is that these are the towns that have said no. And I've already been told that it is not updated, but this is what I have. Brighton, Bergen, Gunther, Harrison, Rib Falls, Stettin, Marathon, and then Rib Mountain, that those were all no. And I don't know where they fall within the MPO, as far as like Rib Mountain, Statine, Marathon, how that fits. But that is what was the complete color. I don't know if it's blue or white or what it was, that those were the, is that, now I've heard that Brighton has changed, and perhaps maybe Harrison has changed as well, and Bergen, so that they are open.
Go ahead.
If you go to the Parks Department website, they have the current map on there. So the ones that are not open at all are Rib Falls, Satine, Marathon, Rib Mountain, and Gunther.
And to follow up on your sentiment, I think if they don't have any roads open, then that's where this provision should apply. I think that makes sense. Because if they're opening some, they're obviously interested in having some travel on those roadways. And I think that would make sense with what we're trying to accomplish with this ordinance. Any further comments? We have a motion and a second.
Chair,
Oh, Supervisor
Mr. Chair?
Gomes.
I see no reason to do it. If they're on the road, they don't have to go on the side road off the county, off into the township. They're the county roads. They're not the township roads. The township doesn't want them. They can put signs up on their roads. There's no reason for this. I won't know.
All right, any further discussion? Supervisor Dickinson?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Oh, we have
Johnson.
Supervisor Johnson. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think this can be addressed very simply by allowing the township to state their objections directly to the county commissioner, who would then close that section. And then they can deal with their local, it gives back local control. And I think that would be a lot easier to write in, because townships may change their mind. Enough residents may get their attention and say, we want to do this or we don't want to do this. And therefore, local control would be maintained. But I think we pass the maps as they are and give the townships the ability to contact Mr. Griesbach and the authority to say, we don't want it open in our township, and let them deal with the fallout. Thank you.
Thank you. My only concern with that would be, I don't know that that would make it easier, based on that the commissioner's review is based on safety, and it may not be a safety issues necessarily within some of these lower volume township county roads. With Supervisor Dickinson, would you like to speak?
Okay, may I respond to that? May I
Yeah, go ahead,
respond to
Supervisor
that? It's not just about safety. It is not just about safety. That isn't the only thing we're talking about here. We're also talking about practicality and maintaining local control by inserting a clause that township chairman, with the vote of their board, have the ability to close sections if they want them closed within their township. And again, let them deal with the fallout. It restores local control. And I think either way, we're going to end up with something where local control does have a voice, but I think this is the easiest way to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Otherwise, I would call for a roll call vote on the amendment being proposed, which is including additional language, which would fall under section 4. It would be A3 likely, in that we would have a provision in there that if none of the township roads are open, then the county roads would not be open within that township. Go ahead, Supervisor Christensen.
The towns would have that option, just so that was made clear, I guess.
I think when we say option, that's leaving a lot of things open-ended. And their option would be is to go through the channels of opening up their township roads. If they open up a township road, then this would kick in, and then the county roads that would be eligible. Does that make sense? Supervisor Dickinson.
Yeah, I'm in between Mr. Gumbs and Mr. Johnson in this, and I think local control matters. I think it's important to the conversation, but I do think we need to move forward with what we're proposing, that we're opening up all the roads. If we want to allow the local township to have some control, then what we would need to do is amend the ordinance when we talk about a review or an appeal or an exemption, and adding that in there outside of safety, that there can be a petition to say, or, you know, a step forward to say, we want that closed or we want that open. I think that then that kind of resolves that, and we can identify that municipalities would have that, you know, a specific section for them, but I still think we need to have citizens to be able to do that as well, if that makes sense. You know, if we have 1,000 people who are saying, well, I want that part of N closed or open, I think we need to respond to that, and I don't know if that can be every 2 years. So where I'm looking to go with that is it would be a no to this motion, but then looking to apply a local, you know, an adjustment to how we would review that outside of safety, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you would be looking for inserting a different provision within, under item 4, designations of ATV routes is what you're thinking about?
Yes.
Okay.
And certainly not that if the local township says, well, we want them closed, I don't think we just say, well, okay, they're closed. They are our roads, they're county roads.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Supervisor Gums.
Yeah, I agree totally with Mr. Johnson's idea. That would give the locals control, and the local people would be all over their local boards. Why aren't we open? That's exactly what would happen. That's all my thoughts.
All right, thank you. Is everybody clear on the amendment that we'll be voting on?
If it could be repeated just for the record.
All right, so the amendment that's being proposed is a amendment to the proposed ordinance under section 4A. It would add in an item 3 stating that to the effect that if township doesn't have any of their local roads open to ATVs, UTVs, then the county sections within that township would not be open as well. Is everybody clear on that? All right, I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Seiler,
Yes.
Dickinson? No. Johnson?
No.
Gums?
No.
Robinson?
Aye.
Biffrick?
Aye. Supervisor Christensen?
No.
No.
Can you confirm that motion or that amendment failed?
It is a 4-3 vote. The
Okay.
motion fails.
All right, so the amendment has failed. Does anybody else wish to propose an amendment? Supervisor Robinson?
I would, and this would be dealing with section 4, designation of ATV, UTV routes, B, public safety exemption. And I'm proposing that upon enactment or during, the public, so it would, public safety exemption upon enactment or would be inserted. And during the biennial review process, the intent is to have the highway commissioner deal with safety concerns upon enactment of the ordinance. So should we have those complaints on Highway N, we wouldn't be waiting for that biennial review, which would anticipate that 2 years after enactment, and it would start right away. So I offer that as an amendment.
We have an amendment being proposed. Do we have a second? If nobody else wishes to, I'll second. Do we have any further discussion? Is everybody clear on what the amendment is proposing? Inserting some language at the beginning of section 4B upon enactment, so that there would be an initial review of the ordinance by the highway commissioner. An initial review of roads. Any discussion? Supervisor Dickinson?
I guess I'm a little confused by that in the sense that we've already had this discussion, you know, we've already talked about all of this. I see where you're going with that upon enactment, but it seems to me that upon enactment, then we can just get a deluge of people coming in and kind of, you know, yeah. So I don't know if that language is really the best. But I certainly see where you're going with that.
Supervisor Robinson?
It's trying to create a process by which we can review those concerns that were raised by the specific trucking industry and not wait for that biennial review. It's an effort to you know, just making sure that we have the ability to deal with it up front. I'm not anticipating that many of those will be, you know, there's going to have to be merit to them. But I think it at least allows that review.
And I think just to clarify, when you're saying we, I think you're referring to the highway commissioner because that's the highway commissioner's role in that process, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
Chairman Pfeiffer.
Go ahead, Supervisor Johnson.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that we always have the ability, always, to revisit this. That the review process, it just is a little counterintuitive to pass something and say it's up for immediate review. You know what I mean? That just kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me structurally. We're either passing it or we're not. I think we have something that's workable. I'll vote against this because let's just move it on and get it done. Thank you.
Well, I think it wouldn't be that the committee is reviewing it. It would be the highway commissioner is reviewing those sections of roadway which have been discussed that there's potential safety concerns on, whether that's heavy truck traffic or other considerations. The idea would be that instead of posting all the roads and then waiting 2 years, that we would have the highway commissioner review some of these specific concerns about safety and be able to address them at this point once the ordinance is passed. This wouldn't be a committee review of any sort. Yeah, Minister Leonard.
Just from an operational perspective, as I understand, I want to make sure whatever the board does and whatever this committee does, there's clarity on what staff are going to do as a result. So as I understand the discussion, the proposed amendment would envision the highway commissioner taking the map that you've all seen that was based on 1,500 car daily traffic volumes, working from that map, and also then doing the public safety analysis and perhaps identifying roads to either open as a safer alternative or close, and then publishing that map in accordance with the ordinance. As opposed to, if the ordinance passes as it currently exists, we would publish the 1,500 daily volume map, and then we would do the biannual review later. That's, as I understand, what Supervisor Robinson is trying to address. I will be honest, I haven't looked at this ordinance to see if the amendment is necessary to allow us to do that, and Corp Counsel's here, so I'll defer to him if upon enactment we would do that public safety analysis first. And also I see Jim's got something he wants to say.
Corp Counsel, do you have any comment?
Looking at the language of the ordinance, I don't know that it's clearly written that upon enactment, the highway commissioner would immediately conduct the review. So looking at 4A, it indicates that the commissioner shall designate highway segments within Marathon County as ATV, UTV routes if during a biannual review of all county highways, the commissioner determines that the segment meets all of the following criteria. So the designation of highways only occurs as a result of the biannual review. And the public safety exception under B only applies during the biannual review. So my reading is that we would need some language to allow us to do that upon enactment if that's the will of the committee.
All right, thank you. Any further comment? Otherwise, we have a, excuse me, amendment that's being proposed that would be an amendment to Section 4 designation of ATV, UTV routes, B, under public safety, which would include inserting language upon enactment to allow for a review.
Chairman Pfeiffer.
Go ahead.
Here's my concern with this. We're either passing an ordinance and we're very clear on it, or we're passing an ordinance that's very fuzzy and putting it on Jim Griesbach's shoulders to say, you figure it out. I don't like that approach. I have a problem with that approach. I think we pass it. We can always, when I said we can always bring it back, I meant as a board, as a committee. We can always bring this up if there are serious issues that need to be dealt with. Not, again, not on Mr. Griesbach's shoulders. He'll be the gathering point for that information, but it would then come to us because it is our responsibility, not Mr. Griesbach's, to make this decision. So I, strongly disagree with this. We'll pass it, but then Mr. Griesbach will finalize the maps. We either pass it and stand behind it or we don't. I think it's a pretty simple equation. And in this case, I think we've talked about it enough. It's time to pass it and move on. Thank you.
And I guess my response to that would be, we have within the ordinance that there's going to be a biannual review of it, which would be this process just happening in 2 years. If that's not something that we want to have staff working on, then we should revisit that language within the ordinance as well. There's going to be a point.
Pfeiffer,
Supervisor Johnson?
you misunderstand completely. You misunderstand completely. The review process every 2 years is fine, but saying we're going to review it after we pass it and change it, that's where the muddiness comes in. The review process, there's nothing wrong with that, and I'm not disparaging that at all. But don't mischaracterize what I'm saying as a total disregard of any review. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying when we pass an ordinance, we should pass an ordinance and not say, we're going to pass this, but Jim Griesbach can decide what exactly it's going to be. I think that's disingenuous. I think that's wrong. I think it's bad policy. So that's why I would be opposing this. Thank you.
Thank you, and I just want to clarify once again what the proposal is for, and this is just including for an initial review. The biennial review, Corp Counsel has stated that it's not necessarily clear that there would be a review for those roadways taking place upon enactment of the ordinance. So this would clarify that once the ordinance is passed, that there will be a review under Section 4B of those specific roadways upon enactment, and then it would also set forward 2 years in the future. It would not be a review of the complete ordinance.
Mr. Chair?
Supervisor Gums.
Thank you again. Absolutely, Mr. Johnson's correct again. You don't need a review right now. In 15 minutes, the granite trucks are done hauling here in this country. Ask the stupid thing and quit hanging all these things on it. There will be a review in 2 years. If something comes up, it can be brought to the committee, as Mr. Johnson so adequately describes, and that committee can deal with it at that time if there's not something that's very, very necessary to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Otherwise, we'll have a vote on the amendment. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
You mean biannual? Biannual, because right now you're saying twice a year.
Yeah, I mean, the language is biannual. Is it, okay, sorry, yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. I guess the intent is that it's every 6 months, correct?
Every 2 years.
Every 2 years, okay. Okay,
Who was the second on that?
State what we're voting on,
I don't
please.
recall. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you.
yep. So just to clarify, the way that the ordinance is being proposed is that biannual review is every 2 years for that safety review. All right, so we have an amendment on the table we'll be voting on. It would be to make a change to section 4, which is designation of ATV, UTV routes. Subsection B, public safety exemption, including language at the beginning of that upon enactment. Roll call vote, please.
Johnson?
Oh.
Seiler?
No.
Dickinson? No. Christensen?
No.
Robinson?
Aye.
Gums?
No,
Biffrick?
Aye.
5-2.
All right, thank you. So that amendment fails. We're back to the main motion, which was passing the, or approving the ordinance as presented. Any further discussion? Supervisor Dickinson.
I think there's only two things that really are hanging us up. One is the local control and one is County Highway N. Those seem to be the only two things that are a concern. As far as local control, I have no issue, and we have the 2-year. All right, if we want to, like I mentioned before, if we want to put in a C or put in an exception as B is an exception, you have public safety as a 1 and then a 2, you would add in some provision that local municipalities can request a review if they change their own policy. So if they say we're going to open up the roads or they're going to close the roads, that they can request, a seat at the table to talk with us if we need to make a change that goes against what they're going to do. Other than that, I just feel that we have a county responsibility to the citizens, the county residents, not necessarily the local township residents, because they're county residents as well. We have a responsibility to them to offer to them movement about the county through our decisions as well, that we're not beholden to a local township. So that would be something I would consider. I don't have the language, I haven't written anything up about that, but allowing those local municipalities to a seat at the table that way. And then the second thing is with County N. The only thing that ever came up about trucks was from one supervisor talking about some truckers and some trucking companies or whatever, and the only discussion about that was County Highway N. If we need to extend N to be closed another 2 miles down the road to the west, I have no issue with that. I don't know if it should go all the way to Highway 97, but if it goes all the way to Highway 97, I guess so be it, and we move forward. I have no issue with that. I'd like to know what other people think about those two things. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Robinson?
The first one will be dependent upon your language, because if it deals with a change, you have several communities that have already decided not to allow ATVs, and that wouldn't trigger review. So the devil would be in the detail of what that language would be. So would we factor into previously enacted, or it's hard to say previously enacted because many local governments may decide, I think they have to act affirmatively to allow ATV use. So what would be the trigger for that consideration of local input? So I think you'd have to give some thought to that.
Further discussion? Supervisor Robinson?
Question for Corp Counsel. Is it possible for us to anticipate changes to either Chapter 23.3311 or 349.11 sub 11 on the legislature, and put in a provision that if in the event that Wisconsin enacts legislation allowing for the posting of speed limits for ATVs and UTVs, Marathon County would establish a speed limit of 35 miles an hour?
Just to clarify, Supervisor Robinson, you're asking if we could kind of create an anticipatory section of our ordinance which would kick in the event the legislature allowed us to regulate speed limits.
Specifically tied into the provisions that are in AB 516 and 506.
Well, if that language was included in the ordinance, it would be included with the understanding that it's currently contrary to state law. So
No, and the trigger would be if in the event that Wisconsin enacts legislation allowing. So it is triggered only upon enactment of the statute. So you don't have that 35 mile an hour threshold out there until the state authorizes it.
off the top of my head, I'm not seeing any specific prohibition other than the fact that it's currently not supported by the law, but again, your initial clause would cover that piece. I think if the language is clear that when it applies, it seems to be something you would legally be able to do.
Thank you for that. Any other further comments, conversation, or I'm ready to call for a vote on the main motion? Supervisor Robinson.
So I will make a motion that we insert a provision that in the event that Wisconsin enacts legislation allowing the posting of speed limits under 233.3311 and/or 349.11 sub 11 of the Wisconsin statutes, for ATVs, Marathon County will establish a speed limit of 35 miles per hour.
We have a motion to amend. Do we have a second? Second from Christensen. I believe that this would fall under section 6A, operator and rider requirement routes. It would be adding on an additional provision there. Corp Counsel?
If I may, I guess I would suggest looking at 6C. That currently has the speed limit for trails.
Okay, yep.
So I might fit there.
Yeah, I do agree. That would make more sense under rules of operation. Thank you. Supervisor Seiler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may, just a clarification, Supervisor Robinson and Corp Counsel, is this more cumbersome than just amending the ordinance if and when the legislature makes the change? I'm just asking for clarification. What is the best approach? I mean, does this, again, clarification, does this complicate things? Is there a cleaner way to do it if we need, hopefully the legislature does make the change?
I'll give my opinion on it. I think this does muddy it up a little bit, and I think the way I would like to see it done, when the state legislator does make a change, that we open up the ordinance and bring it back at that time. Because even though it feels like this is something that's going to happen, if it doesn't happen and we come back in 5 years and wonder what's going on and why we have this language in the ordinance, I think the other process is just cleaner. I understand trying to get it done at one time. Since we've opened this up and we've had it open for some time, and I'm sure everybody would be eager to open it up. So that's just my opinion. Corp Counsel, did you have a thought?
I don't really have an opinion on which policy method is better. I think that's for the committee. So I guess I don't have anything to add.
Further discussion? If not, we have an amendment proposed. That amendment would be to, if you want to, Supervisor Robinson, could you just repeat the language that would be inserted in 6C?
In the event that the Wisconsin legislature enacts legislation allowing for the posting of speed limits under 230.3311 and/or 349.11, sub 11 of the Wisconsin statutes. Marathon County will establish a speed limit of 35 miles an hour on trails, or for ATVs, I think. On roads.
Is everybody clear on the amendment that's being proposed? All right, I'll call for a roll call vote, please.
Johnson? Johnson? We'll come back. Seiler?
No.
Dickinson?
No.
Christensen?
No.
Robinson?
Aye.
Gums?
No.
Johnson?
Johnson's no. No.
Biffrick?
No. All right, so the motion to amend has failed. We're back to the main motion, which is to approve as presented.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to call the question.
All right, the question has been called. Is anybody, is there any objection? Thank you. Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote on the main motion, which would be approve the ordinance as presented.
Johnson?
Aye.
Seiler?
Aye.
Dickinson? Aye. Christensen?
Aye.
Robinson?
No.
Gums?
Aye.
Biffrick?
No. All right, motion passes, so this will be forwarded on to county board. Is that correct?
Correct. I don't believe it's on the agenda's already duly posted for November based on the early meeting date for your public hearing on the budget, but I will convey that to Chair Gibbs and it will be on next month.
Point of order, with all due respect, there's plenty of time to get it posted for the Tuesday meeting and meet the legal requirement for public notice, I believe.
So that's certainly correct. I'll convey that to Chair Gibbs. But your educational meeting is tomorrow, so it won't be on that meeting.
Tonight.
Oh, I'm sorry, it is tonight. Don't miss the hearing on the budget.
All right, so that'll be moved on to the county board. We are on to, and just want to thank everybody for the conversation, discussion on this. This has been an interesting process, and hopefully we'll have finalized it with this discussion. Moving on to item 4B, Wisconsin Department of Transportation Routine Maintenance Agreement. Commissioner Griesbach.
Thank you. Just threw that on there for your approval. The 2022 routine maintenance agreement, again, that is the work that we do for the Department of Transportation and all their state roads. The proposed routine maintenance agreement for 2022 is $3,382,300. That is the same as the last 2 years. They did not know when they proposed the RMAs what the budget was going to be, so again, the final amount is $3,382,300.
Supervisor Robinson?
Is there a reason we need to approve these, or is this an operational issue?
You have in the past, I can approve, you don't need signatures. I just thought I'd put it on there if there was any objections.
I trust you.
Thank you.
Any further comment? Supervisor Dickinson? Oh, was that a, Supervisor Dickinson, were you looking to speak or you just, okay. Keep your hands on the table then. Yes. So just to clarify, is there any action that we need to take on this, Commissioner?
No. I just didn't want to approve before the committee in case somebody had some objection, but
All
I will
right.
sign and we'll be good.
Seeing no objections being brought forward from the committee, we'll move on to item 5, which we have nothing on today. So we'll move on to item 6, educational presentations and committee discussions, North Central Regional Planning, 30-year plan. Mr. Landau, come join us up front.
All right, well, good morning, I guess it is.
Should get another microphone.
It's on, yeah. Thanks for having me today. And as you know, we've been working on a highway maintenance sustainability study for the county. And I just want to give you a little bit of overview, some of the highlights of that report and kind of the status where we are with that today. So the report is going to include analysis of population, land use, and employment. We've completed a segment inventory with breakdown by area. And generally, we see that cities and villages in the county have 0 to 0.3% of the county highway system per. There are a few standouts, however, that range from 1.13 to 3%. Towns typically have anywhere from 1 to 3.6% of the overall county highway system in each town. The segment inventory also has an analysis of traffic volumes. We have 2010, 2019, and 2050 model projections for comparison. Completed an assessment of the network. It has a few components. One, staff discussions on the project. We've flagged a few potential major projects. One would be the Highway O river crossing. Another one would be Highway X, primarily between Schofield Avenue and Highway 29. The road is at capacity for traffic and is in fairly bad shape with the pavement. Double X, conditions along Double X warrant an additional study, I think, and it's particularly the area where the 4 lanes goes down to 2, the intersection issues and things like that. We also incorporated analysis from the traffic model, which is also being used in the long-range transportation plan for the urban area. So we wanted to make sure we looked at that, what that model was saying for this project as well. Essentially, there's no major deficiencies identified, but that doesn't mean there won't be spot problems that are going to crop up over time that will require capacity improvement for safety or traffic flow here or there. So I'm not saying that everything's going to be necessarily always fine, but there could be things that crop up. So as far as the Highway O crossing, that was also modeled in the model, but the results didn't seem to be drawing that much traffic. Our recommendation would be to just reevaluate that again in 5 years when the model is updated. As far as the model results that we have, 3 areas sort of popped out to us from those results. One would be Highway K, traffic volumes on Highway K. Now, they don't necessarily reach a level warranting a 4-lane, and Highway K is already scheduled for reconstruction with alignment and intersection safety improvements, so that probably is addressing that issue already. Double X, and primarily between Business 51 and Industrial Park Drive. Again, it's already a 4-lane, but the neck down to 2 is a potential concern. And then the third one that popped up to us was Highway N between KK and US 51. Again, already a 4-lane, but that just should be monitored for developments in Rib Mountain as things develop there. We looked at doing a functional assessment of the highways. We looked at a few areas with that. Functional classification. Now, the county highway system is 90% collectors, but there's also 5% of the system is arterial or higher level roads, and then 5% is like a local service function of road. And the question is, should those types of roads be in the county highway system? Then we looked at another factor we looked at was low traffic. What should the threshold for traffic for a county highway be? And so we looked at a couple of different potential thresholds there. Situation, though, is in both of those cases, removing those segments from the system doesn't really appear to gain much other than poking holes in the network and interrupting continuity. So we really don't have a recommendation for pursuing those concepts. Another one is an urban-rural balance. There appear to be a few areas with a higher proportion of county highway. An example would be Highway X in Weston, very much like Rib Mountain Drive that was transferred to the town of Rib Mountain. It serves or developing to serve more of a local access function, sort of economic center of the community, and, you know, more local control over how that corridor is managed for the community's benefit is something that we think is definitely something that needs to be looked at, and I think would be in the village's best interest. And again, you know, similar to the situation that we had developing at Rib Mountain there on Rib Mountain Drive. And finally, we were asked to look at the Highway R extension. Basically, our findings there, and just a summary, high-level summary here for today. We looked at the local circulation plan, where that concept comes from. Plan is 20 years old, it's never implemented, there's no support, and conditions have changed. So at a minimum, you would need to probably update that plan and get the local buy-in. That would, in order to see if that was something that needed to be maintained and move forward. Improvements to 39 have already alleviated a lot of the issues that were, you know, generating the concept in the first place. The 20th Avenue situation, you know, it's within a half mile of the proposed R corridor, and it basically serving the same function or role that the R proposal would. And there's extensive land acquisition remaining, so it's potential significant financial undertaking there. So with these types of conditions, you know, we're, as the Regional Planning Commission, you know, not sure that the project can still be justified today. And so we can't recommend moving forward with it at this time. So that's where we are with that recommendation. Make sure I didn't feel like I missed something there. Nope, I didn't. Okay, sorry. So ultimately, all of this information, and there's more things that will be in the report. I wanted to hit some of the kind of interesting highlights today. Is all to inform the maintenance priorities, and this is the section that we're still working on right now, and that's going to include a fiscal assessment of the projected maintenance costs and revenues that are associated with that. But one question that we've been dealing with related to that is the number of years we schedule specific projects over in the report. There have been questions about the value or utility of going through the effort of putting together a 25 or 30 year schedule of projects that's ultimately not going to be really followed in 10 years or whatever. Anyway, conditions change, and it can be hard to predict the condition of any given pavement in 20 or 30 years. So the alternative, one of the alternatives that we're looking at, is to establish a more realistic 5-year schedule and project that out over, you know, with an inflationary factor or factors, project that out to evaluate the 25-year fiscal impact out to the 2050 that we would see there. So basically I wanted to ask if you had any thoughts on that particular concept to give us some direction moving forward on that before I wrap up. Go ahead.
Yeah. Does the committee have any thoughts on that? Supervisor Robinson?
I think we were trying to look at what Washington County did in projecting out, and you know, and this is a planning tool to identify projects. It's also a planning tool to try to, again, direct Kevin and Jim's efforts as they go out and schedule crack filling in maintenance. So I'm hoping that we can carry it out as far as we can, and you know, there are some big variables in there. If you do a Highway O river crossing, that's significant. I think what we're hoping to do is get, you know, identify needs for the future, but also what is a realistic schedule for us to maintain our roads. And I think the goal there was to project it out for that entire period of time to give us a better understanding of the capital needs and how we need to commit resources to it, maximize general transportation aid. That doesn't happen with a 5-year plan. I understand that there's limited value beyond that short horizon, but I think, again, we were hoping to get some good guesses beyond and not limit it. But, you know, I look at Washington County, and I think that's our model, and if we can garner some information from them, I think that would be helpful.
And I see what you're saying. I just wanted to clarify what my thought is. The alternative would be we'd have a representative 5-year program, and we would basically say, okay, so what the next 5 years beyond that, could look, without specifying the specific roads, we would look to duplicate that effort. And then there'd be some assumptions that apply, okay, well, this is where O is going to fall, for example, or whatever. And then we'd have the inflationary factors that would be calculated, and then you'd have these 5-year blocks that would be representative of fiscal impact, rather than going through the exercise of just picking all these highway projects that you're going to just change in the future anyway.
But there are expected life cycles for roads, and I think what we're trying to do is
Right,
capture
right.
those expected. If we invest in, 2-inch overlay, what will that do to extend the life? When is that expected to happen? I think that's the meaningful part of this exercise, to give us a little bit better certainty so we can, again, look at general transportation aids, maximizing those. It may result in us looking at those other projects and staging those in such a way as to maximize that general transportation aid. But we keep fighting a losing battle where we don't have our plans in place. We have hiccups in general transportation aid. One of the purposes of this was to try to stabilize the state assistance and maximize that as best we can. So I would hope that we would be, I know it's guesstimates, but it's still a plan, and looking at expected life of roads is a good way of doing that.
Yeah, and I think to your point, and part of this planning effort is to look at budget-wise too. Are we budgeting enough money currently so that we're not kicking the can too far down the road and looking at a huge bubble that's going to have to burst at some point. So getting an idea of making some of those projections, obviously we know that's difficult. Predicting things such as this, as we've seen in the last 2 years with the pandemic, there can be huge spikes, huge fluctuations with this stuff. But I think we just got to gather the best information we can and base our assumptions off that, and make sure that we're at least preparing ourselves at this point so that we're not falling off a cliff in the future. Any further comments? Any direction? If not, Daryl, do you have an idea when?
Mr. Chair.
Someone in the sky. Who is that?
Richard.
Supervisor Gomes, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just saying it's pretty unreasonable when you don't know the price of oil, and the price of oil is what determines the cost of blacktopping. It's pretty tough to predict out in 2 years, much less 5 or much less more, because that's what you're dealing with. That's my opinion.
All right, thank you. Daryl, do you have an idea when you'll be bringing back a draft?
Yeah, I was going to wrap up with that.
Perfect.
So at this point, we're expecting to have that draft for you to review by mid-December, and then we would look to have the discussion on that in January. Now you've got some of the other big discussion items out of your way. We'll have maybe a little more time to discuss this in more detail at the January meeting. And that's really all I wanted to.
All right. Well, thank you for your time, and we'll look forward to that discussion in January.
All right, thank you very much.
Moving on to agenda item 6B, 2018-2022 Strategic Plan, Vice Chair McEwen. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, or it's almost afternoon. Good morning to the rest of the committee and staff. The reason I wanted to discuss the reasons I wanted to discuss the strategic plan with the Infrastructure Committee, and I know at your October 13th meeting, you did have some discussion on the strategic plan, and I know Sandy had some information. I don't know if you want to share that now or.
Well, thank you, Vice Chair McEwen. Reviewing the notes from the 13th the meeting on that day, there were some specific points that I thought we probably all remember what we said, but just for everyone else's memory and for Vice Chair McEwen's benefit, I would like folks, we'll just kind of go in the same order, just to do a quick summary of the comments and some of the conclusions on that day. So I'll invite Supervisor Robinson to talk to us on his broadband perspective.
Are we looking at what we've done or where we're going?
Well, you addressed very succinctly some of the achievements, and we have significant accomplishments in that area, but you also identify the challenges, which I think are important for all of us to hear.
So I think, again, we at the last meeting talked about our partnerships with internet service providers to secure funding through grants, whether it was the county's application for the National Telecommunications and Information Administration that's still pending with Charter, whether it was for the Public Service Commission grants for the ARPA round. There were $38 million of requests from Marathon County. We received $150,000 of funding for the Serenity Project in the Nori Lake area. Unfortunately, the rest were not funded. The county board has also advanced at its last meeting to proceed with working with Fond du Lac County and others relative to bug tussle and expanding wireless and fiber to premise. And Steve Schneider's been at the Eastern and Western Towns Association meeting and modifying the plans, but that will go a long way in addressing some of the short-term needs. Eventually, I think we'll be looking at fiber to the premise. The challenges as we go ahead are getting a better understanding of where the gaps are. And Supervisor Dickinson has done an excellent job of communicating with his residents and getting some feedback, but we need to identify where there will be gaps. And even with the work that Bug Tussle is anticipating doing, there will be gaps. Because they continue, a heavy emphasis of that is relying on fixed wireless, and fixed wireless works unless there's trees and terrain challenges, and they're also not planning on serving all of the areas in the initial rollout. So we need to know where those gaps are, where we can focus our efforts, and where we can work with other providers. And we've worked well with others. There are some concerns, and we need to monitor what's happening in the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. Charter and LTD out of Minnesota were awarded significant portions of the county. That can be a 10-year rollout, and 10 years is forever. So we have to look for ways that we can accelerate their developing that. Most of those are in the northern or western part of the county, although there are pockets and small projects on the eastern side. So we have to track those, and we may need to look at how we can incentivize the delivery and the installation of that gigabyte fiber sooner, because that will go a long way in addressing needs in those areas. But again, we need to know where we're not serving and where we've got some others, and we'll look at how we might apply the American Rescue Plan dollars to facilitate that expansion and partnering, but we're limited because we can't provide that last mile. And then I think long-term, there's the issue of access and there's the issue of affordability, and there's more and more discussions so you run the service by my house, but I can't afford it. There are opportunities for providers to provide for those hardship situations, and there are some grants, and we might want to just keep those in mind as we look forward if there are people that are means limited that have trouble. I'm thinking of the elderly and low income individuals that may not be able to afford what we think is an affordable rate. So we'll have to keep those in mind. So surveying where the needs are, identifying how we can partner with the internet service providers, keeping track of grant opportunities, and looking at how we might allocate ARPA, and then keeping the concept of broadband equity and how we can provide access to those rural residents are what we need to be doing. And that's a short-term goal. We need to do that in the next year or so.
So, thank you for that, Supervisor Robinson. And I know one of the other things that you had on your list was about the Dig Once policy is something that's so important. So I wonder, you've given us a review again of the challenges. What would you say in the next 6 months are the things that are possible to achieve for this,
Well, we need a local ordinance in Eric Lindman from the city of Wausau is very interested in trying to advance that. There's been probably a lukewarm interest in the part of other communities, although I think given the rapid rollout, the interest is accelerated. So we'll need to get that ordinance. We have some models. Melinda Osterberg was helping with that effort, and with her departure, we've kind of lost some momentum. So that will be something that the Metropolitan Planning Organization will be trying to share with the communities in the immediate Wausau area, but may have some countywide application. We don't want people ripping up roads for fiber right after we've reconstructed them, so that communication with the internet service providers is critical.
Okay, thank you. So Vice Chair McEwen, do you have questions of Supervisor Robinson or the committee?
I don't have questions, but I do have several comments. And one of the areas that I wanted to just have a short discussion with infrastructure was at the objectives such as Objective 8.7, which Supervisor Robinson just followed up on. What I'm encouraging the committees to do is look at those strategies that are on there. There's 5 strategies for 8.7, and there's one outcome measure. And I did review the meeting on the 13th, and from the presentation that Supervisor Robinson gave there, I did review the strategies, and I believe that every one of the 5 strategies, A through E, was utilized by the Broadband Task Force. And that's significant with, moving this objective forward and making it, successful for the county. So, that's just one of the areas, and I just wanted to highlight 8.7. And I know the commissioner talked about 10.12, and that has to do with one of the outcome measures, but I'll let you follow up on that. But that was one of the topics, is I'm just asking the members to look at these strategies, because you have to remember, these were passed in 2018 or adopted in 2018. Some of these strategies, may need to be changed, may need to be deleted. I'm not sure, but like I said, the 8.7, those strategies were followed pretty close to what was listed on there. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And a nice segue. I mean, and here the strategies really fit well with the work and what's going on right now within the Broadband Task Force. So now we'll move to Objective 10.12, and there was some, again, good discussion on that, and led off by Commissioner Griesbach. And I think I'll just let you, if you would like to touch on where we are with the PACER and the bridge ratings, your thought on some of that.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, for the PACER and the bridge ratings, this is our year right now. We're actually doing the PACER ratings. We have been maintaining over the 7, which is our goal, and our also goal is to have the bridges over 50 on their sufficiency ratings, and we've also accomplished that. To provide a safe network, we actually last year, as you recall, we did the safety plan, and we're implementing some of that. Right now, we're having design done on one of the intersections of County Trunk Highway Q and J, which the plan identified as a unsafe intersection, along with the intersections of County Trunk Highway K and W. So we are working on those plans. We also have been working on improving our salt brining operations for the roads in the winter. Every year we added another brine maker in our Abbotsford location to help that cause. And in strategy F, secure state and federal funding, I applied for 4 different bridges in Marathon County 2 weeks ago for additional funding. We have secured funding for additional 3 bridges in the last cycle. And currently we have, correct me if I'm wrong, seven plans being developed. Once the infrastructure bill is passed and you have to have shovel-ready projects, we are working on plans currently on those to have them on the shelf, and we're looking at building more shelves for more plans. Lance wants me to spend money, and I'm doing it.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. And So with that report, we can see that the outcome measure 1 has not only been met, but exceeded, and does support definitely strategy A. So as we move on to outcome measure 2, there were some challenges identified, and there were comments, I know you heard them, but I'm going to call on the supervisors again just to touch on some of the conversation about perhaps changing the language or, you know, again, maybe some strategies. And Supervisor Dickinson, I know you had some thoughts on outcome 2. Here you go. I didn't get a chance to get the word out to everybody. But as we were struggling to take a look at something that was pretty hard for this committee or our board to impact. And so there were some conversations. Supervisor Johnson, while you're reviewing that, Supervisor Dickinson. Supervisor Johnson, can you hear us? Perhaps not. Okay, back to you. Okay. Are you on the line, Supervisor?
Here.
Okay, so I know that you had some comments at the meeting on the 13th about some of the change of the language on that outcome measure that might be more practical. Do you recall that at this time?
I'll be honest with you, I do not.
Okay, well, I think
When you talk as much as I do, you never remember everything you said.
Okay, well, thank you for that. We're going to go back to Supervisor Dickinson. He has the advantage of having the plan right in front of him. So thank you, Supervisor Johnson.
Yeah, I have the advantage of your notes, so that that triggers my memory because I'm much like Supervisor Johnson. I don't remember a lot of things unless I take copious notes. But that measure is about the automobile crash rate, setting this to be reduced by 5%. And I think that discussion is around, that is something that we really cannot control. And so setting a number of 5% really doesn't allow us to ever really accomplish that through meaningful efforts. There are some things we can do to help mitigate, and that's some of the things we discussed, like edgeline rumble strips, centerline rumble strips, signage, speeds on curves, things like that, to help reduce that fatality rate or severe injury rate. But an actual automobile crash rate, how do you really do that? I think the past year and a half, as we spoke, was really indicative of if people are going to behave a certain way, they're going to behave a certain way regardless of what we tell them to do or not to do. So adjusting that and looking at that metric and figuring out a better way to make it something that we can meet is the way we want to go.
Okay, thank you. And as I recall, Administrator Leonard, you did have some thoughts that you shared with the committee on that day. Could you share them again?
Yeah, I think Supervisor Dickinson hit the nail on the head relative to what are the things we can control, and the comments at that meeting caused me to kind of reflect on how we drafted this plan and some of the strategies we used relative to outcome measures in other areas were, just as Supervisor Dickinson said, rather than try to set a target of what we were looking for in terms of a reduction in or an increase in a certain measure, we called for us to accomplish a task in pursuit of a goal by a date. So to Supervisor Dickinson's point, if the things that we want to really move forward are the implementation of safety strategies or crash mitigation technologies, we could say something to the effect of, by this date, we want to accomplish the implementation of, whether it's edgeline, rumble strips, centerline, whatever those things are, or so many aspects of your safety plan that you had addressed previously. I think we can flip the narrative a little bit in terms of what we're measuring, because I think, to Supervisor Dickinson's point, there was consensus at that meeting that, it's not as though we had our roads were infinitely more safe, from March of 2020 through, let's say, June of 2020. It's that no one was driving from, very few people were out and about. They were working from home other than, and for a variety of reasons. So moving to that, the behavior that you want staff to accomplish, I think is first of all, that's very helpful for me, because then we can build work plans around accomplishing those goals. And we did that with some other work plans. If you take a look at objective 3.3, that is the strategy that we utilized under outcome measure 3. We indicated that by December 31st, 2019, at least one practice change will be implemented that is aimed at decreasing the number of young adults age 17 to 21 in the Marathon County Jail who were the subject of a court order for services as a child. So the board provided direction to staff. This is our goal. We want to break this pipeline of juvenile justice to adult criminal justice. By this date, we want you to implement at least one thing with that thing in mind. So you could maybe adopt a similar strategy relative to crash data. Just a suggestion,
Sure.
certainly not.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
in looking at and listening to the meeting from last month, I think something to the effect of putting in an outcome that we would, per se, I don't know, and I don't know what the correct number on this, what would be realistic for us, but to implement 2 safety mitigation measures on very high volume, high traffic, high crash rate areas within the county on an annual basis, starting in 2021, or by, if we want to do it the reverse way, by 2022, that the county will have implemented 6 crash reducing mitigation features on high volume, high traffic crash area. That's something that we can control. It gives us a measurable, I agree, the 5%, although ideal and great, is something that the folks in this room would struggle to control. We can have some input into it, but at the end of the day, we're not the ones, at least we're not a high percentage of the ones behind the wheel and able to affect that.
Right, right, thank you. So for Vice Chair McEwen, that's some of the discussion, and before I move on to one other point that was brought up that day, are there any other comments from the committee on this outcome measure or some of the comments? Okay, if not, what I would like to share is that there was one other item brought up by Supervisor Christensen, and I did have an opportunity to let him know I'd be checking in with this. So could you please share?
Thank you, Supervisor Sadler. No, I just brought that up, I can't remember, it's a month or two ago, about out there on Highway O for a new, for the land for a new Parks Department and the Public Works Department. You know, to me, that seems like you got easy on and off there. It just seems like a done deal out there, but I know Mr. Griesbach had some other different feelings on that. But I know that on Highway U, that wasn't panning out quite like we had hoped to. So I don't know if there was any progress on that or not. I know you were going to start looking into that, Mr. Griesbach.
Yes, we had a few discussions again with the village. I was looking into some state statutes yesterday, just look at where we can go. I probably need to have a conversation with Corp Council again with that. Again, with the Highway O, I just don't know where there's an area that's big enough with water and sewer in that area.
Yeah. Okay.
I think this is probably a discussion that needs to happen with its own agenda item as a bigger picture West Side master plan or whatever we want to discuss about it.
Sure.
It could fit it within the plan, but I think that's a discussion that we should and need to have.
Well, Mr. Chair, so to that point, yes, there has to be more conversation during an agenda item, but I did want to bring that up because it was part of the discussion during the strategic plan discussion on the 13th. So thank you all. And with that, Vice Chair McEwen, I think you've heard most of the comments or summary.
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor Scheidler. And like I said, there's a couple other items that I just want to mention with the strategic plan. Is also look at the departments that are contributing to these objectives. And just with 10.12, I believe the sheriff's department should be listed on there. It's not the highway department, but as far as reducing crashes and safety, the sheriff's department, I believe, could contribute in many different ways with, accomplishing that that objective. And then the other two topics that I just wanted to touch base on is the template that everybody should have a copy of it, and thank you for making a copy of this for everybody. This is just a tracking piece of paper to track the the items the things that we have talked about. 8.7, you could probably fill this up already with items that were done by the task force. But like I said, you're welcome to tweak it, to change it in different ways. But ERC actually came up with this and started using this a year ago, I believe, and they've been keeping it up to date, which is nice. And the reason it will be very helpful is that it will be able to track the objectives to see if they've been implemented, and this strategic plan, we're finishing up the 4th year of the 5-year plan. So we're going to start talking about revising the 5-year strategic plan, but also look at the comp plan when we do that, because the strategic plan is developed from the comp plan, and that's a longer 20-year plan than these 5-year ones. And I know many things have changed when this was adopted in 2018. And I know the administrators sent out an update on the strategic plan in 2020. And it's easy to, and I've used that to look back to see where progress has been made with some of these other, some of these objectives. And like I said, if there's things that need to be changed as far as strategies, objectives, and outcome measures, that's probably going to be discussed when a task force is formed again to look at would be a 2023, 2027 strategic plan. So just to keep that in mind, and then just to end with what it says on the agenda is what does this committee want to accomplish in the remainder of this term, which is we have approximately 6 years left on this term. And so what
6 months, I
policies,
think.
what resolutions?
6 months left on the term, not 6 years. It'd be a
I'm
it'd
in
be a real
for,
long term.
I'm in for 6 years, but
Okay.
yeah, okay. 6 months, yeah. Yeah, that 6 years would be way too long. But yeah, 6 months, so I apologize. But yeah, 6 months, so you just to start looking at, what you want to accomplish in those remaining 6 months. So is there any other questions or?
Any questions, comments from the committee? I think just speaking about the very last item we just had on here, the 30-year plan from regional planning, I think that is at least one of my top items that I would like to see us get accomplished over the next 6 months. Supervisor Seiler?
So if I may, following up on that, for the purposes of the committee work, not only on the strategic plan, but everything that we do, recently, we've just been hearing about a lot of plans. And so I was trying to clarify exactly what plans pertain to or would be informative for our discussion for the new strategic plan. And it turns out that there are several plans. And so I did have a chance to visit briefly with Mr. Lang, who has a better memory of and a list of the plans than I have. And maybe he could just, if I could ask you to speak to the number of plans that you are aware of that are out there impacting your department in this committee, and are some, how many plans are out there? And what are they? And I know Andy as well. So if we have two gentlemen that can speak to it, I'm just asking for some clarification, please.
That's a really big open-ended question.
There you go.
The most active one we have right now is our safety plan that was just completed over the past year. And that one, I think everybody in here is familiar with at this point. As far as the long-range highway plan, that 2050 plan that Daryl spoke about is kind of the document that's in process right now. Beyond that, I know Andy can speak on the MPO. They also have a 2050 plan. I'll let him hit on that. He can talk about kind of where that's at, when it's going to be revised. But those are kind of our two plans. Beyond that, we will typically have just most of what we do right now is maintaining the system that we have. We don't have any plans for any new highway expansions. 28th Avenue was probably the closest thing that we had that was a long-range change to what our network is. Beyond that, at this point, unless Jim corrects me on something, our plan is maintaining and keeping our current system up to speed. As far as traffic congestion and expansions, Daryl hit on that one. Highway X I believe that's our only road in the western area that's getting to the point that it's close to capacity. Everything else is functioning at acceptable levels of service, and just maintaining, taking those older pavements, replacing them when they're at the end of their life is kind of what we do on a day-to-day basis. I'll let you know the MPO.
Thanks, Kevin. The MPO long-range plan is updated every 5 years, and we are currently at the tail end of finishing the latest update. And it's currently projected out to 2050. We have to take a 30-year look into the future as best we can. And so that's something that kind of guides a lot of our other decisions and policies with the MPO. That is just focused in the metro area. So from the former village of Brokaw down to Mosinee, and then from Weston to Stettin is basically our area. But obviously, the county highways and state highways do feed into and out of the metro area, so it is all rather interconnected. There are also probably some regional plans from, say, North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning that may come into play. You could also look at state plans, such as the state has a freight plan and a rail plan, which may have some impact on this area. So I think we're talking about lists of plans that could be relevant to this body. There's quite a few, and some have more weight than others, obviously.
Any further comments from the committee?
Just to add one plan that I can't believe Andy missed is we are working with the Parks Department on a bike and bed plan also.
All right. Supervisor Seiler? Oh, okay. You're turning off. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's input on this, and thank you to Vice Chair McEwen for joining us today. Moving on we're going to make a slight change in the agenda, updates from CCIT Director Klein, which is also known as Administrator Leonard for the moment.
And just for the moment, don't ask me any hard IT questions or we'll both be disappointed. But in terms of updates, Jerry couldn't be here today. He's attending a meeting relative to the broadband expansion effort that you're well aware of. Just a quick update on a couple of big projects that are within your packet. They're alluded to in Jerry's project list. But the enterprise resource planning solution, our Workday solution, that implementation is underway. It's going well. We have our governing committee, our oversight committee that is really setting those strategic directions. It is going to be, as I've said before, a considerable amount of work, but between the Workday implementation and then 3 really important integrations that build off of that, the one that's most significant that this committee will probably hear about at some point is Cartograph, which we're looking to use for a number of things, but one of them also for asset management. Hoping to bring that on for asset management for some of the plans that you just talked about in terms of roadways. Teller is another one. That's the cashiering solution that we'll be implementing here at the county. The city uses a similar thing already to provide for more customer-friendly online transactions. And then last is Tracker, which is a debt investment tool and financial planning tool that the city really is looking to utilize, and it'll integrate with some of our work as well. Second is Office 365. Jerry's talked about that before. Don't need to belabor that. But one real thing that we've been working on that we had about a 6-month window, a 6-month plan to implement. For those of you that are familiar with multi-factor authentication, so if you log into a website and it says, hey, I'm going to send it to your cell phone, a text message with a code you have to enter in, that's multi-factor authentication. 2 ways of authenticating who you are, and Jerry gave me a list of what they are, the various things they can be, but essentially it's those 2 factors. We had a plan to implement that for a number of things, including our email access off-site and a number of other things to our network. As all of you know, and for those of you that attended the Wisconsin Counties Association presentation, cybersecurity is a big deal, and insurers are pushing all forms of business, including government, to make significant investments, and we're no different. The City County Information Technology Commission received a letter from its insurer earlier this week indicating it was not going to be renewed for cyber insurance because we needed to move up our implementation schedule from 6 months to 2 months. So we're working to do that. North Central Healthcare got the same letter from their insurer. The county is, well, we haven't gotten it yet, but I haven't checked my mail this morning, so maybe we got it as well. But this is not a surprise. We're working on it. We're in the same boat as a lot of other entities. So we've, at CCIT Commission, we had a board meeting earlier this week to discuss this, and we're bringing all the resources we can to get that done within 2 months. But just keeping you informed. It wasn't unforeseen. It was on our radar. We just now have to move up our implementation schedule. So those are the 3 big projects that Jerry wanted to update you on. If you do have any questions or concerns about a project, you can reach out to Jerry. Or if you have any questions, I can hopefully answer the questions to the level of depth that you would have.
Any questions for the interim CCIT director? Other than why my email isn't working?
Yeah, that's a 365 thing. Or no, maybe for you it's not.
Yeah, who knows? All right, thank you for that update. We'll move on to updates from Highway Commissioner. Go ahead, sir.
You have the written report, so the only thing I will add is we did have a bad accident with one of our workers about a week ago. He was cutting a poplar tree, and when the tree started to drop, the top end actually just broke off and came down and hit him. He was wearing all of his proper PPE gear. He still ended up with 3 broken ribs. His chest badly bruised, and they're going in for MRI yesterday, I believe, for his shoulder, and he had a couple stitches to his head. So we're very fortunate. It could have been a lot worse. In your report, I did mention the issue that we have, the same as everybody else, is getting vehicles with the chip modules. When I wrote the report, we were waiting for 3 of them. We had no idea when they're going to show up. The manufacturers have no idea when they're going to show up, and 1 showed up yesterday, so that was a good thing. The other 2, we have no idea. The plants are closed right now. They are taking a look at what they're going to even make available for us. Our plan was to bid out trucks early this year. We were going to bid them out this time in October maybe, and right now the manufacturers aren't going to even take a look at bids because they don't know what's going to happen. So we could have a number of different things happen to us, including getting the repairs of trucks this winter. There's a lot of parts out there that we normally order. There was a 1-day order time. Now we're looking 6 to 8 weeks. So we only could put so many parts on the trucks, on the shelf. So we are trying to make contingency plans when we run out of trucks this year, how we're going to cover the routes.
Does anybody have any questions for the Highway Commissioner? Seeing nobody, Supervisor Robinson.
Motor pool, you know, in light of your last comment, does it make sense for us to revisit some of the discussion on a motor pool? And I'm thinking, you know, cross-use of vehicles, and, you know, I don't know if there's any opportunity for us to look at Parks Department vehicles for, I know they're not as big, but I just throw that out there as, is it time with this shortage to begin to look at the concept of a motor pool and cross-department use of vehicles?
We did take a look at the motor pool issue a few years back. However, with the state billing system, how we have to bill out for vehicles, it becomes very difficult to start grabbing a vehicle from another department. We've talked to neighboring counties about them covering us and we're covering them. That seems the best alternative at this point.
Vice Chair McEwen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to, it was 2014 we had that task force. And I think it was determined that there was issues with ordering. They were trying to get on the same, you know, system as far as ordering parts and stuff like that, but it just never came together. But after visiting the city's facility, they definitely don't have room for expansion, and there, you know, like I said, there was some issues there, but nothing ever came out of that task force, nothing, you know, concrete, but we did have that in 2014. Thank you.
Any further questions, comments? Seeing, hearing none, thank you for that report. We're on to item number 7, announcements, future meeting and agenda items. Next meeting will be December 2nd, 2021. Commissioner Griesbach?
One thing also upcoming is our winter road school, January 17th, 18th, and 19th at the Chula Vista, Wisconsin Dells. Please let me know if you're going to attend so we can make reservations, and don't want to be blunt, but make sure if you're going to mark down your coming that you do come. We've been running into a lot of issues in the past year or two that we've been making a lot of reservations, and the rooms are sitting empty. So please make sure check your schedules, calendars more than once to make sure you're going to attend before we make reservations. Thank you.
Make sure your calendar is.
Thank you. If we have nothing else, we're up for item number 8. Motion by Robinson, second by Christensen. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Aye. And we are adjourned at 11:54. Thank you, everyone.